James was working on an old transport truck near the edge of the alien spaceport. The sun was low, and his hands were covered in grease. He didn't mind. This was his life, quiet, simple, and far from Earth. No one really talked to him unless they needed something fixed. He liked it that way. But that peace broke the moment she appeared. She stood tall, maybe taller than him, with smooth, silver-blue skin and long black hair tied behind her head. Her clothes looked expensive, something only rich aliens wore. Her sharp, glowing green eyes studied him with calm and focus. "Are you the human mechanic?" she asked softly. James stood, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Yeah, that's me." "Something broken?" The woman paused for a second, then said something he never expected. "I want to hire you." "To be the father of my child?" James blinked. "What? You?" "Heard me," she said calmly. "Not forever. Just for a short time. You will act as the father. That's all?" James laughed, thinking it was a joke, but her face stayed serious. Not a single smile or twitch. "You're not joking?" He asked. "No. Why me?" "You're human." "That is important," she replied. "And I checked your background. You have no family here, no attachments, and no crimes. You are simple, clean." James frowned. "That doesn't sound like a compliment." "I mean it as one." She sighed. He looked at her again, confused and unsure. "I'm not looking for trouble. I don't know what this is, but I don't want to get pulled into something dangerous. There is no danger. I will pay you well. You will live in comfort. You will not be harmed. You must only stay with me for a short time, pretend to be the father, and protect my child until the birth. After that, you are free to go." With more credits than most humans make in 10 years. That caught James's attention. "Why pretend?" he asked. "The child's safety depends on it." She replied, "If they think the baby has a human father, no one will ask questions. If they don't, bad things could happen." James looked at her again. Her voice had cracked slightly at the end. Her eyes were still strong, but behind them was something else. Fear. "I need time to think," James said. "Of course," she replied, "but not too long. I'm being watched." She turned to leave, but then added, "My name is Zuri. If you agree, come to the forest house west of this port." Before nightfall, she walked away, disappearing into the busy port crowd like a ghost. James didn't go back to work. He sat on the truck's hood thinking. He didn't trust her, not fully. But she didn't lie either. Her words felt cold, but true, and there was something else, something in her eyes that reminded him of someone once lost. A quiet pain, a silent fight. He had no family, no plans, just tools and long, quiet nights. Before sunset, James was at the edge of the jungle, walking the path she told him. Trees grew thick here, and strange lights flickered in the leaves. After nearly an hour, he reached a large gate guarded by 2 quiet machines. The gate opened without a word, and Zuri stood waiting on the steps of a large white house. "You came," she said. "I guess I did," James replied. "Still time to run, though." Zuri looked at him with something close to a smile. "Not if you care about the child." He followed her inside. The house was silent and smelled like soft flowers. Strange symbols lined the walls. Servants walked past them without speaking. "You'll live here now," Zuri said, "for the next few weeks. Your room is upstairs. You will attend meals with me. You must act like you are my bonded partner, but not touch me unless I allow it." James raised an eyebrow. "Right? Got it." She handed him a small ID crystal. "Your new name in public is Jazin, my bonded one. Learn it." He took the crystal, still feeling unsure. As she walked away, she said something strange. "The child must believe you are his father, because the world must believe it too." If not, he may never be born at all. James stood in the grand hallway, holding the crystal, surrounded by soft lights and silence. Outside, night had fallen. Somewhere a child was growing, a child with no father, a child that might not survive without a lie. He sighed deeply and looked toward the stairs. What did I just get myself into? He whispered, but in his heart he already knew. And he wasn't walking away, not now. Living a lie the next morning, James woke up in a bed that was far too soft for someone like him. The ceiling above him shimmered slightly, glowing with a gentle blue light that changed with the time of day. Everything in this house was quiet, rich, and strange. It felt more like a royal palace than a private home. But he wasn't here on vacation, he was here to lie. He walked down the hallway, noticing how the alien servants bowed slightly when they saw him, not out of respect, but fear. Their eyes never met his. Their steps were fast, careful. It was like they were trying not to be seen. Even while serving, Zuri waited for him in a long hall filled with floating candles and silent music that seemed to hum through the air itself. She wore a long green robe that made her glow in the light. She didn't smile. She never did. "We must be seen together," she said without a greeting. "The neighbors are watching. We go for a walk in the gardens today." James nodded slowly. "And I hold your hand?" She looked at him. "Only when I say so." They walked side by side through her massive gardens, filled with plants that moved on their own and flowers that whispered when the wind touched them. A tall alien woman from the next estate waved to Zuri, then stared at James with wide, curious eyes. "This is my bonded one, Jazin," Zuri said in a calm voice, using his new fake name. James smiled awkwardly. "Happy to meet you." The woman laughed softly and replied, "A human? How bold of you, Zuri." James didn't understand if that was a compliment or insult, but he didn't ask. Zuri just nodded and moved on. As they walked deeper into the garden, she finally spoke again. "You must understand something," she said. "Every word, every step, every breath you take here is part of the role. One mistake, and the Watchers will doubt." James stopped. "Watchers? You said it was just a cover. Why does it feel like we're being hunted?" Zuri turned to him slowly. "Because we are." James stared at her. Her voice was soft but firm. There was no drama in her tone, just truth. "There are those who don't want this child born. Some fear what it might become. Some want to punish me. If they know it is not yours, the protection ends." "The contract is broken." James nodded, his stomach tight. "And if they find out?" Zuri answered without pause. "Then we both die." "And so does he." He looked away, trying to breathe. This was far from what he had expected. He thought he'd be playing pretend for a few weeks and walk away richer. But this wasn't a job. It was a test and maybe a death sentence. Later that day, servants brought them dinner in a room filled with golden chairs and clear floating lights. The food smelled like roasted spices and sweet roots. Zuri sat across from him, calm as always, while two servants stood at the corners of the room, not moving an inch. "Eat slowly," she whispered. They must see a real couple, a real bond. James tried to act normal, but every bite felt heavy. He glanced at the servants. One of them, a small alien girl with orange skin, kept her eyes low, but her hands were shaking. James could feel something in the air, something hidden, something afraid. Later that night, he walked the halls alone. The house was too quiet. No laughter, no voices. Just silence and the soft hum of alien tech. As he turned a corner, he noticed a strange door, partly open. Curiosity pulled him closer. He stepped inside. It was a cold, dark room. In the center was a large glass pod filled with glowing blue liquid. Inside, floated a baby dot. It wasn't born yet, but it moved. It was alive. Its small hands twitched, and its eyes were closed, but peaceful. Its body looked like Zuri's, but there was something else. Something different. Something that felt human. James stepped closer, placing a hand on the glass. "So this is you," he whispered. "The reason I'm here." Then a voice came from behind. "You weren't supposed to find this room." James turned quickly. Zuri stood in the doorway, her eyes darker than before. Her voice was low, sharp. I was just walking. I didn't mean to. It doesn't matter." "You've seen him now?" James nodded slowly. He's beautiful." Zuri's face softened for the first time. "Yes, he is. And very, very special." "Why me, Zuri?" James asked quietly. "Why not hire a real warrior or a stronger man?" She looked at the pod, then back at him. "Because real warriors care about honor. Strong men want glory. But you just want peace." And then she left the room without another word. James stood there for a long time, looking at the child in the pod. This wasn't just pretending anymore. This was real. The hidden baby. A storm had rolled in overnight. The wind howled against the glass walls of the estate, and flashes of green lightning lit up the distant skies. James couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that strange baby floating in the pod. It moved like a dream, peaceful, quiet, unaware of the danger. Zuri kept talking about. He finally gave up on sleep and wandered the halls, letting his feet carry him. Something about the silence of this place made him feel more like a ghost than a man. Every room was perfect, every surface clean, and yet everything felt empty. No warmth, no life. He found himself back outside the same locked door where he had first seen the baby. But this time, the door wasn't just unlocked, it was wide open. Inside, the lights were dim, but the pod still glowed softly. The baby had grown. Not by much, but enough that James could tell. The hands were more formed, the head slightly larger. And now he noticed a strange heartbeat. Sound, steady and strong, coming from the machine. He stepped closer, placing a hand on the side of the pod. The moment his skin touched the glass, the liquid inside reacted, brightening for a split second, as if recognizing him. James pulled his hand back, heart racing. "What was that?" A voice came from the shadows. "It responds to you." Zuri stepped forward, arms crossed, her eyes watching him carefully. "You are already bonded to him, even if you didn't know it." James frowned. "I thought this was just pretending. A cover, a lie." Zuri didn't blink. That was true. At first. James stared at the pod. So what changed? Zuri looked away for the first time since he met her. She walked slowly to the pod and placed her palm beside his. "I told you my enemies want the child dead. That was not the full truth. This baby, he is not just mine. He is the result of a forbidden experiment, one no counsel allowed, one that used something they all fear." James took a step back. "Wait, what kind of experiment?" She turned toward him. "A mix of ancient alien bloodlines and human DNA." James's stomach dropped. "You used my DNA?" "Yes." "You said I was just pretending." "I said you were chosen to play a role. I never said how deep that role went." James's mouth felt dry. "So this kid this baby, he's actually mine?" "Part of you lives in him," she said quietly. "And that makes him something new, something they cannot control." James shook his head. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you would have run, and he needs you." He looked again at the baby. So small, so still, but alive, real, and now part of him. "I didn't agree to this," James said, his voice shaking. "No," Zuri replied. "But fate did. Suddenly the room lights flashed red. A loud alarm echoed through the halls. Zuri's face turned pale. "They've found us." James looked at her. "Who?" She grabbed his wrist. "The ones who want the child erased from existence. Now they know he's nearly ready to be born." James's instincts kicked in. He ran with her through the hallways, the sound of heavy machines powering up in the distance. The estate was no longer silent. It was alive with fear. They reached a hidden chamber below the house. It looked like a shelter filled with old weapons and thick steel doors. "You stay here with him," Zuri said, placing a control device in his hand. "If I don't return, activate the escape pod." James stared at her. "You're going to fight them?" "I have to." He grabbed her arm. "Don't die. He needs you too." For the first time, her expression broke. She leaned in close, whispered something in her own language, then turned and ran. James looked down at the pod. The baby floated quietly, unaware of the world shaking outside. He knelt beside it, whispering, "I don't know what you are, or why I was chosen, but I promise I won't let them take you." Above him, the storm raged louder, and the lie was no longer a lie. Asterisk the real reason the estate burned above them. Smoke drifted through the air vents, and distant sounds of energy blasts echoed like thunder through the steel walls. James stood in the underground shelter, holding the activation device in one hand and a makeshift weapon in the other. "The babies?" Pod glowed softly beside him, calm, quiet, untouched by the chaos outside. Zuri hadn't returned. Every second felt like a year. James kept glancing at the sealed door, expecting it to burst open with enemies or with Zuri, injured and bleeding. But neither happened, only silence. Finally, footsteps echoed in the hallway. James raised the weapon, hands tight. The door opened. Zuri stepped in, covered in ash, her robe torn at the shoulder and blood dripping from her side. But she was alive. James ran to her and caught her before she collapsed. "You're hurt." "I stopped them," she whispered. "But more will. Come." He helped her sit against the wall. Her breathing was heavy, but her eyes were sharp. "You need to know the full truth now. No more lies." James looked at her, exhausted. "Please, just tell me everything." Zuri nodded slowly. "My child was never supposed to exist. My people, the Arake, are forbidden from mixing blood with other alien races. It's a sacred law. But I broke it. With who?" James asked. Zuri's eyes darkened. "With a ruler from the Koresh Empire. Our enemy. It was supposed to be a peace agreement, a bond to stop the war. But when they found out, both sides rejected us. They wanted the child dead, said it was unnatural, a threat." James stared in disbelief. "So you ran?" "Yes," she whispered. "I escaped. I stole the embryo. But it wouldn't survive in my womb, so I brought it here, to grow it in the pod." "And me?" James asked softly. "Where do I fit in all this?" Zuri reached for his hand. "We needed a legal way to protect him. On this planet, under the Galactic Treaty, a child with a human father cannot be harmed by any alien government. That's the law. If I had a human partner, no empire could touch him." James frowned. "So I was your shield. You were the only one I could trust," she whispered. "The only one who didn't care about bloodlines or power. Just a quiet man fixing machines. That's what made you perfect." He looked down, processing it all. His whole life had been small, simple, and quiet. Now he was the only thing standing between this child and total destruction. "Why not tell me the truth from the start?" he asked. Zuri looked away. "Because if I had, you wouldn't have stayed." James didn't answer for a long time. The pod beside them hummed softly. The baby moved, arms twitching like it could feel them nearby. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," James finally said. "You already are," she whispered. "You stayed. You protected him. Even before. You knew the truth." James looked at the pod again. It wasn't just glowing now, it was pulsing, a slow heartbeat. A warm, golden light that filled the room. The baby was nearly ready to be born. "What happens when he comes out?" James asked. Zuri sat up straighter, her voice firmer now. "He will be powerful. Not in strength, but in what he stands for. Peace between enemies, a new start. But only if he lives." James stood, gripping the weapon tighter. "Then I'll make sure he does." Zuri smiled faintly for the first time. "You are more than I hoped." Suddenly, the walls shook again. A low rumble filled the shelter. "They're coming back," Zuri said, trying to stand. James helped her up. "Then we fight. Together." He glanced one last time at the pod and whispered, "Hang on, little one. Your parents are right here." The door began to spark. The final battle had begun. Enemies at the door, the shelter trembled as the steel doors groaned under pressure. Red warning lights flashed above James and Zuri, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Somewhere above, the enemy had returned louder, stronger, and angrier than before. They weren't here to threaten anymore. They were here to end it. James stood in front of the pod, weapon in hand, his jaw clenched. He wasn't a soldier. He had never held a gun before this week. But something had changed in him. It wasn't just about survival anymore. That baby in the pod, part alien, part human, part something entirely new, was his now, his responsibility, his blood. Zuri leaned on the wall, still bleeding from her earlier fight, but her eyes were clear. "If they break through, they'll kill me first, then the child. They'll leave you alive to avoid breaking the treaty, but only if they believe you're truly the father." James glanced at her. "Then they better believe it with their last breath." The doors sparked. A deep grinding sound followed. Someone or something was cutting through. "We don't have much time," Zuri whispered. James looked down at the glowing pod. The baby stirred again, tiny fists pressing softly against the glass. It was nearly ready. He could feel it. Life was moving inside, and it was calling out for safety, for protection for him. Then the doors exploded. A wave of smoke and fire filled the chamber as tall figures in black armored suits stormed in. They wore no flags, no symbols, only death in their glowing red eyes. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy. James stood tall in front of the pod, arms wide. "Don't take another step," he growled. The leader of the group pointed his weapon at Zuri. "Step aside, human. She is not protected. She's the mother of my child." "That child is illegal." James didn't blink. "That child is mine, which makes him legal in every star system under Treaty Code 9. There was a pause, a long one. Then the leader took a step closer. "Prove it." James tossed the weapon aside, reached into his pocket, and pulled out the DNA chip Zuri had given him, proof that his cells were part of the child's creation. He held it up high. "This says I'm the father. If you touch him or her, you break galactic law." The invaders hesitated. Some looked at each other. The leader lowered his weapon slightly. But then one of them raised his arm and aimed at the pod anyway. James didn't wait. He launched himself forward, tackling the soldier to the ground just as the blast fired. It missed the pod but hit the control panel beside it, sending sparks into the air. Zuri cried out, "No! The pod systems are failing." The baby's glow inside the chamber began to flicker. Fluid inside the pod bubbled and shook. A soft alarm rang from the wall. Early release initiated. James pushed himself up from the floor, gasping. "What does that mean?" Zuri crawled to the control screen. "It means he's coming now." The enemy soldiers looked confused. Some stepped back. The pod's glow became blinding, turning from gold to bright white, and then it cracked. A single hairline fracture down the middle. Everyone in the room froze. The glass split and warm mist poured out. The glow dimmed, and inside the pod, a small figure moved. A newborn alien and human in one opened his eyes for the first time. The air around the child shimmered. James moved to him, lifting him gently. The baby was warm, alive, and watching him with glowing eyes that matched neither Zuri's nor James's, but something in between. "He's beautiful," James whispered. Zuri smiled weakly from the ground. "He is hope?" The soldiers didn't move. They COULDN single quotes T dot somehow. The child's presence filled the room like a silent command. Weapons lowered. Eyes softened. The leader of the enemy group took a step back. "This child is beyond law." James held him tighter. "That means you leave now." After a long, quiet moment, the leader nodded. He turned and ordered his team to withdraw. No war. No more blood. Only silence. When the doors finally closed again, James sat beside Zuri, still holding the child. "You saved him," she whispered. "No," James replied. "He saved all of us." In that burning, broken chamber, a new life had entered the galaxy. And everything had changed. The escape. The air was heavy with smoke and silence. The enemy had left, but their presence still lingered like poison in the walls. The pod was shattered. The shelter systems were failing. And in James's arms, the newborn child, his child slept peacefully, unaware of the war he had been born into. Zuri sat against the wall, weak, her breathing shallow. Blood soaked through her robes, and her silver-blue skin had lost its glow. She had fought harder than anyone, but now her body was giving up. James looked at her and knew what had to be done. "We can't stay," he said. "This place won't hold much longer." Zuri didn't respond right away. She only nodded. "There's a backup shuttle deep in the forest," she whispered. "Hidden beneath the old ruins. Only humans can open it. It's coded to your biology." James swallowed hard. "Of course it is." She looked at him. "You were never a lie, James. Even when I didn't tell you the truth, I prayed you'd stay." He couldn't answer that, not now. His mind was already racing. He wrapped the child in a heat cloth, secured him against his chest, and helped Zuri stand. Her steps were slow, painful, but determined. Outside, the forest was no longer quiet. Smoke from the battle above curled through the trees, and distant patrol drones buzzed in the night air. The moonlight filtered through tall branches like broken glass, guiding their path and exposing their every move. They moved fast but careful, sticking to shadows and avoiding the main roads. Zuri whispered warnings when danger neared, and James used his mechanic sense to disable a few sensors along the way. Hours passed like days. At one point, the baby cried not loud, but soft and tired. James gently hummed an old Earth lullaby, something he barely remembered from childhood. It worked. The child calmed again. Zuri glanced at him. "He knows your voice." James looked down at the baby and felt something deep inside him shift. This wasn't just a job, not anymore. This was fatherhood, raw, real, and terrifying. They reached the edge of the ruins just before dawn. Huge stone structures, overgrown with glowing moss, stood in silence. Somewhere below was the ship. Zuri guided James to a cracked wall. "Behind this, there's a scanner." James pressed his palm against the stone. A soft blue light scanned his skin, then blinked green. The wall trembled, slid open, and revealed a dark tunnel. They entered quickly. Inside, the ship was waiting. It was old, half-buried, and looked nothing like modern vessels. but the lights blinked to life as soon as James stepped in. The ship knew him. Zuri collapsed in the seat behind him. Her strength was gone. "You'll need to fly," she whispered. "I can't." James strapped the baby in a small pod seat beside him, then took the pilot controls. They were rough but familiar. He'd worked on engines long enough to figure it out. The ship rumbled to life, shaking the ground as vines fell away from its sides. Outside, lights flashed in the trees. They'd been found. Enemy patrols ran toward the ruins. James didn't wait. He slammed the ignition. The old ship screamed as it rose through the ground, tearing through roots and stone, then shot into the sky like a wounded bird. The sky lit up with blaster fire. Explosions cracked behind them, but James didn't look back. He focused forward through the fire, through the clouds, through the fear. The baby let out a soft sound, not a cry but a hum. A strange, peaceful hum, like a song only he could hear. James looked at the child, then at the stars ahead. "You're not just any child," he whispered. "You're something new." Beside him, Zuri tried to speak. "There's a safe zone, far from here. On the outer ring. No one can reach us there. You'll be safe. He'll be safe." James looked at her. "We'll all be safe, I promise." Zuri's eyes fluttered, and she nodded once before finally closing them, her body giving in to rest. James set the course, hands steady. Behind them, the planet burned. Ahead, a new life waited. And in between, a human father flew into the unknown with an alien woman at his side, and a child who might change the galaxy sleeping beside him. A new beginning. The stars stretched out endlessly. Ahead of them, cold, silent, and full of secrets. James sat at the controls of the old starship, his hands firm but calm. Beside him, Zuri lay resting, her breathing slow but steady. The wounds from the attack had taken their toll, but she was still alive. And behind him, tucked in a warm cradle of light, the child slept. Not just any child, his child. Part human, part alien. Entirely unique. The outer ring system was just ahead now. A quiet, uncharted region far from the politics and power struggles of the galaxy. Zuri had called it a no-flag zone, a place without rulers, borders, or laws. A place to start over. James stared into the dark horizon. He had never dreamed of being a father, let alone one to a child born from two enemy empires. Yet now, the small heartbeat he had once felt through the glass pod was the very thing that kept his own heart steady. Suddenly, a soft alert blinked. On the console, an incoming ship, unidentified. James tensed, ready to act, but Zuri stirred and reached for the control. "It's not an enemy," she whispered. "It's the Guardian." James raised an eyebrow. "What's the Guardian?" Zuri sat up slowly, pain in her voice but purpose in her eyes. "A protector of old laws. They don't fight wars, but they watch those who try to escape them. They'll test the child's right to live." James frowned. "Test? What does that mean?" Before she could answer, the ship docked beside theirs. A single figure appeared through the scanner tull, covered in shimmering robes, with a face hidden beneath a metallic veil. The Guardian floated in midair, speaking with a voice that echoed in James's mind, not his ears. "You carry a forbidden life." James stood in front of the child. "I carry my son. He is illegal by the codes of blood, unapproved, unaccepted, unhallowed." James didn't back down, and yet he exists. "That makes him real. That makes him right." The Guardian hovered closer. "Then he must be judged." Zuri stepped forward. "Let him live. Let us live. Only if he is balanced. Not just of blood, but of soul." The Guardian reached toward the child. James's fists clenched, but Zuri placed a hand on his arm. "Wait." The light around the baby grew brighter. The moment the guardian's hand neared the cradle, the child opened his glowing eyes. The ship stilled. Even space itself felt silent. The guardian froze, and then bowed. He carries not just the past, but the future. Without another word, the guardian disappeared into a pulse of light. The other ship vanished from the radar. James let out a shaky breath. What just happened? Zuri looked at him, eyes wide with awe. They accepted him. They saw something even we didn't. James looked down at his son, who now stared up at him with calm, curious eyes. In that gaze, James didn't see war or fear. He saw hope. They arrived at the outer. Rang hours later. A small moon, full of green forests and quiet valleys, waited below. No weapons, no guards, no rules. Zuri stepped out first, breathing in the fresh air. It's beautiful. James followed, holding the baby against his chest. Yeah, it is. They built a home on the cliffs overlooking the sea. Nothing fancy, just stone, wood, and warmth. James fixed machines for nearby settlers. Zuri taught the child both human and alien languages. And the baby now named Kale grew fast. He laughed like a storm, ran like fire, and his eyes always glowing held a wisdom far older than his age. One night, as the stars blinked quietly above, Kale sat on James's shoulders, pointing at the sky. Will we go there someday, Dad? He asked. James smiled. Maybe, but only when you're ready. Will they try to hurt us again? James thought for a moment. They might. But this time, we'll be ready. Kale grinned. Because I have you and Mom? James nodded. Exactly. And in that moment, with stars above and family beside him, James knew the truth. He hadn't been hired to be a father, he had been chosen. And nothing would ever take that away.